All right, this is Dustin Sherman again coming at you with another episode of Forgotten Freedoms. Today I am here with my co-host Scott Stansberry, running the computer and cameras and all that kind of stuff. And today we have our guest on here is going to be Karrsen Brannon-Young, correct?
That is correct.
I always remember Karrsen, but the other part of it, I'm still kind of getting used to.
Half the assembly calls me Karen, so it's cool.
Well, so we're going to talk a little bit about kind of his transition from where he used to be until now and what he's seen at the assembly and just kind of a progression of things as far as the politics here in Anchorage and kind of his thoughts on where we might be going and all that kind of stuff. So, Karrsen, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you could be here tonight. And, there's been a whole bunch of different things that's been going on. We're right in the middle of an election. So we're working on trying to get people in there from the school board and for the assembly. And I think the city's ready for a change. What do you think?
The ones who have been paying really close attention, absolutely. I think the more attention you pay to what's going on, the more you know that we need change. The only concern I have is have enough people been paying attention to know that we can win this.
Right. I know I seen something the other day that said that was there like 30,000 votes that's been put in, and what they sent out 220,000 ballots or something like that. It was a big number.
Yeah, I don't want to speak to exact numbers because I don't want to spread misinformation because they'll remove us from Facebook if we do that. But and a lot of ballots were stuck in Seattle, stuck unquote.
Yep.
There's a report today on Must Read Alaska. I don't know if you read that. Dozens of ballots have not been received by people. It's very difficult to know exactly how that they are mailing out ballots in a way that's fair. And I've heard a lot of reports that, and this has been something that I've been concerned about. A lot of people are concerned about when the ballots come in, that's where nasty business can happen. What I've been concerned about the whole time is when they're mailing them out. I think that with vote by mail, and the closer I look at it, the less I like it. A lot of the issues, the way that it can be used to sway an election by those who are in charge of the elections, are a lot more subtle than people realize.
Right.
I have a friend, I won't name names, but he said that he was living with a roommate, and he isn't registered as, I think he's registered nonpartisan is what he said, and his roommate was registered as a Democrat. Well, they both got a ballot, okay? Neither one of them filled it out. A week later, his Democrat friend got another ballot. Like, hey, a little reminder. And the thing is, with the way our local elections work with the clerk's office, Barbara Jones is our municipal clerk. She is hired by the assembly. Okay. And I don't want to speak to her motives, but she has to keep 5 of them happy, right, in order to keep her job.
Right.
A majority. Right. So,
and there's a lot of pressure
6
on her too.
Yeah, that's the thing is like and I prefer to look at the situation that she's in. She has to keep a majority of the assembly happy. We like to think that the clerk works for us, but she's hired by them. Right. So I see that as a clear conflict of interest.
Right.
And I know that when it comes to chasing votes, that the Democrats have all the same advantages that the Republicans have. Okay.
Right.
We can look at precinct data. We know which precincts turned out for Bronson and for Forrest Dunbar in the last election.
Right.
And you can look at that. And when you're making decisions, when you have a limited number of ballots because some are stuck, well, someone has to be making a decision about where that ballot's going. Okay, and so I'm kind of curious as to who's making that decision and how that decision gets made. And that's not to impugn anybody, by the way. It's just I don't want to say you don't know what's the phrase. You never assume malice where incompetence would explain it, but it's pretty clear that this election has not been conducted competently.
Well, and that's another thing too, where our ballots are not actually made in Alaska, right? Our ballots are printed and everything else down south. Then they got to be shipped here, and there was a story going around that a bunch of them got stuck in Seattle, like you mentioned. And, we could completely eliminate that part of it. I mean, if we're stuck with mail-in voting, we eliminate part of it by manufacturing the ballots here locally. Then there's no other third party that you can blame when they don't make it up here.
Yeah, I don't know if why you wouldn't do that. Like we have so many, like companies that print out literature within like 48 hours, So it's I don't see why you couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. Like
and I sent off a couple emails to Barbara Jones just to get some clarification on some stuff. And the thing is most people don't realize that she's actually pretty accessible. She's probably more accessible than members are, honestly. And she tries to be as honest as she can. I've had some discussions with her from last year's election with Bronson, and I see some of the frustration she's going through, and I'm not. I look at myself on this one as I kind of find myself in the middle of it, not right or left, but the middle of it, because first of all, I think that she got put in there actually originally for her job from a conservative. I think it was, if I want to remember right, it was Dick Traney, I think. I could be misquoting that, but I think it was Dick Traney that put her in there. And, he's been known as a conservative. Whether he is or not, I don't know. But as you know, as well as I do, that most of the parties have kind of flip-flopped a little bit in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So who knows? But, anyone that's got any questions for Barbara, send her off an email to the Muni clerk's office, and she'll most likely get back to you. With whatever reasoning she has, she will try and, fill you in on that. So, so you've been through a progression over the last, I don't know, how many years you've been in politics now?
So I would say I started in college. I got fascinated by just the subject, and I grew up during the Bush era. I grew up during the Iraq War, when being a Republican meant you supported the war on government saying, "Hey, we have to fear the terrorists, so that's why we have to tap your cell phones," basically.
Right.
So that ended. They were against gay marriage. They were against legal marijuana. And what's happened
still are.
Yeah, some of them, but they kind of accepted it for the most part. So what's been happening is interesting. The parties have kind of flipped in a lot of ways. The libertarian wing of the Republican Party has been ascendant. And Trump, whatever you think of him, he kind of was transformational in that he really did flip the chessboard in a lot of ways. And what happened to the left under his during the Trump era really, really made me very scared and nervous. He offended a lot of people, I think, with his Twitter feed and his brashness. And it caused a lot of people on the left to start questioning whether free speech was really that important. And I've seen that this crackdown, this desire to crack down what's allowed to be spread on the web. It's like they seem to be more concerned about stopping the spread of misinformation than defending speech. Is one thing that's been happening, and they are openly throttling people who go against the grain. And you've seen that's really accelerated during COVID. COVID was really what really scared me, their reaction. It was like basically they saw COVID as an opportunity to get rid of Trump. That was how everybody on the left looked at COVID. They didn't want to admit it to themselves, but I remember asking some friends of mine, you press the button and like a magical, wonderful, effective vaccine comes out, everybody can have it, we're done with COVID, but it means Trump gets reelected. And not a single one of my Democratic friends answered that question.
Would push the button probably.
Well, they didn't say they wouldn't, but they were like, you could tell like that's a hard question for them.
Right.
And then basically you started seeing this crackdown on misinformation online, and they started to feel, it felt like they were just giving up all of their ability to tell truth to tech companies. And the biggest one for me, the one that really scared me the most, or I would say started it, was when Alex Jones got banned from like 3 different platforms. Do you remember that? Yeah, you got banned from, I think it was Facebook, Twitter, and one other platform in like a 24-hour period. And my friends were cheering. They were like, wow, yay, we got Alex Jones. And I was like, I don't like Alex Jones that much, but do you not see the problem here with like giant mega corporations deciding who's allowed on the internet? And this really got really scary right after the election. And I don't defend what Trump did at all, but they actually banned Parler, a social media app that we were using. Amazon took that off their web hosting. They literally took it off the internet, right? And so you saw this embrace of this ideology because they were so enraged about Trump that they really embraced a lot of bad things that they shouldn't have.
Right.
And
I think that whole thing where they're trying to silence people's voices and everything else, it's going to eventually come back to hurt them more than it's going to hurt us. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so the one thing that the Republican Party or Conservative Party does well, we save our money. We don't blow it on absurd crap, right? And you look at all the big tech and everything like that. You could say probably 5 or 6 big tech companies that control the internet. I mean, they literally do. You've got GoDaddy, and you've got all these other groups that dictate what can and can't go on the internet. Now, what happens if, say, someone like Elon Musk steps in, opens up a whole nother internet, which really basically doing. Say he starts looking at things more like the conservative side of things, and if you follow his tweets lately in the last year, he's leaning right. Yeah. He's not really leaning left too hard. And you know, the thing is Elon's going to do what's good for Elon. Period. End of story. But eventually, what's going to happen is with his satellite internet, is you're going to have people on there. It's not open source. It's ran by one guy, and you know the people that work for him are going to do what he wants them to do. And so now take everybody getting on the satellite stuff, and it's progressing fast. I mean, he's got them over in Ukraine, and that's how a lot of the people over there are starting to communicate back to us. And you know, you put that much power in one guy's hand, you're asking for a lot of trouble. And that's exactly what the left has kind of done with Jeff Bezos, with guy from Facebook. They've put so much power into a few people's hands, and it's going to come back to bite them. And I mean, look at Trump. Trump just opened up Truth Social. I mean, there's still people lagging to get on, but it's probably going to be the number one competitor with Twitter very soon. And it's very close to it. My wife's on it. She gets to play around on it. And the funny thing is the conservatives usually stick together. We have different ideals and we have different opinions, but we do stick together. That was proof positive whenever Trump won. Hillary had no idea that she was going to lose, and lose by a pretty decent margin, honestly. So I think what's going to end up happening, and you're going to start seeing the red states be more red, not purple. My home state turned purple and then blue. That's Colorado. But I have a feeling that, you know, from what I've understood from teachers and educators and things like that, this generation that's coming up right now is more conservative than any other generation before it. So in another 10, 15 years, liberals may be gone.
Well, that's actually interesting you say that, because I actually have always thought of myself as a liberal. That's the funny thing. I don't think my value, when my left-wing friends look at me, because I became a Republican recently, and they ask, what happened to you? I've said nothing happened to me. I stayed exactly where I was, and you guys got weird.
Yeah, you're a classic liberal.
Yeah,
or a
classic liberal. And that's why I don't know where, this is actually, I don't know where along the line everyone started to think that liberal meant that you love big government, you vote for Democrats. I'm not sure where that language change happened. Because I believe liberal believes you believe in liberalism, classical liberalism. And I don't like to be the person that like lets other people take my word. Like, no, I'm a liberal. It's just I think that the Republican Party and the conservative movement is more liberal now. And, you know, when I was in school, I took a class called Modern Political Thought, and we studied the history of liberalism, right, and conservatism as well. And if you look at liberalism, was a product of the Western Enlightenment. Basically, people started asking, like, in medieval Europe, why do kings rule us? Mm-hmm. And they came up with this idea, this radical notion at the time that like your birth does not determine your opportunities. Like, the idea that a king's son was equal to a peasant's son, that was laughably ridiculous, right? Mm-hmm. But it was that philosophy that informed our founding fathers. Conservatism, on the other hand, it's different. It's not contradictory to liberalism. What it really is you conserve the values that your country has. You conserve your heritage, your traditions, and the cross-generational unity that engenders, right? And it just so happens that in America, conservatives are defending a liberal tradition. That's why if you go to a conservative in Saudi Arabia, they're going to believe in a very different thing than a conservative in America or a conservative in Russia. You know, in Russia, conservatism, a Russian conservatism probably believes in a very strong executive because that's what they've been historically used to, right?
So that's a lot different than what like I was taught growing up. Mm-hmm. So I had probably some of my favorite teachers in school were history teachers. I had U.S. history, geography, world history. I mean, you name it, we had it. And I used to hunt and fish with my history teachers, right? One of my teachers was my baseball coach. And we knew where everybody lived, and we communicated very well. But the way we were taught is Republican or conservative, whatever you want to say, was conservatives typically didn't like change. Democrats or liberals, whatever, they were always wanting to enact change, right? So the way that it was taught to me was if something's not broke, you don't fix it. If something's working, leave it alone, because you'll start tinkering with it till it breaks. And that's what I've seen has happened in the last 10, 15 years is we've seen policies and we've seen different laws and stuff like that, like SB 50 or SB 91 here in Alaska, where they basically let criminals kind of run rampant. Back when I was still living here in Alaska 10 years ago, you stole a car, you went to jail. Now you steal a car, it's a misdemeanor. And you go to San Francisco, and of course, liberal state, blue state. If you steal up to $999, you don't get anything. It's like a misdemeanor if they catch you.
And that's this is where the conservatives and the Republican Party are better at, just in general. This is where I've always been with them on this one. I've always felt, and this is something I dealt with in Seattle, where you can't tolerate vagrancy, right? At all. You just can't allow people to just sleep on the street. And the idea that you can is just ludicrous to me. A lot of people don't know this. Have you ever heard of Boise versus? Sorry, there's the court case slipped my mind right now. Boise, yeah, it's Boise versus Idaho. It was a court case that happened recently. Can you look that up, Scott? Real quick.
Not without shutting this thing down. We can look it up on our phones.
Gotcha. There was a court case in Idaho. They basically tried to prosecute a homeless guy they tried to enforce anti-vagrancy laws. Mm-hmm. The guy appealed, and the courts said basically you can't enforce anti-vagrancy laws unless you have enough beds available for the entire homeless population. And that was for the Ninth Circuit Court. Okay. And what ended up happening was the Supreme Court declined to hear that, right? Meaning it only stands under the states that are under the Ninth Circuit, which Alaska is a part of in the entire West Coast.
Right.
So you now have a situation where homeless people, it's very hard to do anything about that. And we're seeing that at the local level. Mayor Bronson wants to enforce anti-vagrancy laws, but he can't unless we have enough beds available, right? It's a weird situation. But the attitude that the left has, they believe in something called housing first, right? Mm-hmm. Like, well, we have to get these people a house. It's like, well, on whose dime, right? Why does it have to be the government's dime? Why do we have to raid our pockets to do it? There's organizations, private organizations that can do this, right? You don't need to go to government to solve that. We have organizations like the Hope Center that get people off the street and things like that, right? So we can do this. And I also believe that religious organizations have a tendency to be much better at this because people who are on the street, they need something to believe in. And the left tends to go towards, an ideology, advancing an ideology, I think, that says this is not your fault, mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times it is. People don't want to acknowledge that the people who are on the street are because of decisions they made.
Crap. It actually doesn't look like it was a city versus it was 6 people. Let me pull it back up again if I can find it. I just shut it down. Hold on. Yeah, so it looked like it was 6 homeless folks against, let's see, Boise versus... I'm looking it up right now, folks, so that you guys can. Boise versus, what was it? Idaho? I was able to pull it up. I did find it. Yeah, and that's the one thing too is, whenever I see people out there that are wanting to work for food or wanting to work for the money and stuff, I have no problem. Humphrey versus the city of Boise. It was a 2018 decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals and the North Circuit in response to a 2009 lawsuit by 6 homeless plaintiffs.
Martin versus Boise. Martin versus Boise is what it is.
It's a different one?
Martin versus Boise.
The thing is I've helped homeless folks as often as I possibly can. When I was a kid, we've actually taken homeless people in. We had a guy that used to work with my dad at a bean plant, and the guy was a native guy, native Indian, and he came to town and he was looking for work. So my dad put him to work in a position, and then we gave him a place to stay for like almost 6 months. The guy was new to Colorado and didn't have anything, no resources at all. We put him up for like 6 months, and his name was Chris Richter. I'll never forget the guy. Not everyone's like that though. It's and that's kind of what I see with Democrat versus conservative is typically conservatives lead with, their brain. They don't get involved in the emotional details of someone's life. And that's kind of what the Democrats want to do most of the time is they want to pull on those heartstrings and they want to,
You can't think with your heart. And I found that on the left, it's like a lot of really good intent a lot of times. But you really have to focus on its results that matter, not what your intent is. And I hear that a lot from the left. This is not our intent. Well, or you intend to do good things, but the end results aren't good.
Right.
So you do have to think with, and I found that the more I've talked to conservatives, and I'm fairly new to the conservative movement, I would say, only in the past couple of years. But I found that it seems like I see a lot more clear thinking and realistic thinking on the ground from a lot.
We don't overreact. That's the one thing, we don't have those knee jerk reactions to a lot of things. Okay, let's see if something works. If it works, we leave it alone. If it doesn't work, okay, now we'll tweak it a little bit and we'll see if we can change it. We'll look into other ideas. Most of us are willing to do that. If someone comes up with a better idea, we're most likely to jump onto that. But some of the stuff that I've seen, there a lot of it, and keep in mind I work for a prison. A lot of it is some of the prison reform and things like that. I'll tell you right now, the prison that I worked for was a privately owned prison. It was a for-profit prison. We got paid X amount for inmates, and of course we fed them and we housed them and everything else. But when like Obama was in there, he shut down, I can't remember how many different prisons across the country, but that's right there is one of the reasons we have the rampant crime across the nation. Not just in Alaska, we have a lot here too, but across the nation, there's no place to put anybody. That's why they get. That's why it's like a revolving door in the crime system right now. There's no place to put anybody, and the thing is the prison that we had was it was 4 cell blocks. We could house up to almost 1,000 people. Now it's sitting completely empty. It could be used for many different things, including mental health. It could be used for one of those places, and all those prisons are sitting empty. And there had to have been like 200 or 300 across the nation. And it was Corrections Corporation of America. I can't remember exactly how many we had, but it was nationwide. And he shut down every one of them.
Wow.
Stroke of a pen. So, I mean, we talk about mental health and everything like that here in the country. We have places that we can treat people. The thing is they're privately owned and the government doesn't want nothing to do with them anymore.
Yeah, I think with that problem, you do need to get people away from the situation that they're in. You know what I mean? You have to get them away from the people who are their enablers.
Yep. Their vices. There
was one idea I heard from I think it was one of the Beggages, not the one that's running for Congress right now, but wanted to like open up a prison to turn it into a homeless shelter, kind of like away from the city. I think it was out in Sussex, I believe, and I think that's actually a really good idea. Bronson's kind of strategy, what he wants to do is like tell people, look, you can go to prison, or you can go to a rehabilitation center, and that's where you want to do. You have to get them away from areas where they're going to be, exposed to that to the drug dealers and all their friends that are going to get them back into those habits. A lot of times.
Speaking of Bronson and the idea of putting a shelter here, kind of in the center of town. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of the housing and stuff like that, but I don't like, and I've always kind of said something against this. I don't like the fact that it's going to be in the middle of the city. A lot of people on the left are like, well, there's no place, they can't get to bus stops and they can't do this and whatever. The thing is they'll find the way. They always will. And my problem is putting them in the center of the city is guess where? An arena. Well, look at all the crap that happens outside that thing. They're always getting the cops called there, right? So they put it in the center of the city. They're not taking them all the way away from their vices. It may be a little more difficult for them right now, but it's not going to be difficult for them for long. They'll figure out a way. They always do. Same thing with inmates and communication between cells. I'll tell you right now, if you want to see creative people, put them in a position like in a prison, and they will communicate from one side of the cell block to the other with envelopes under the doors on strings. It's amazing to see how creative people can get. And you put them in positions, they ain't got nothing else better to do than to think of ways to get their vices. And unless you remove them entirely, like move them out of the city to the places that they get stuff from, they'll always get it. I have a little experience with that because one of my little brothers had an issue with drugs when he was growing up. And my little sister had a problem too. I didn't grow up with either one of them. So I wasn't an influence on them. Wish I would have been. But if they want it, they'll get it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't see. Real quick, I'm going to bring Scott in. Scott, you got any questions for Karrsen? We've been on for a little bit, and sorry, I'm used to running these things alone, and I know I'm not alone anymore, but I get kind of a motor mouth, so I'm going to let Scott ask some questions and go from there. But So what do you got for us, Scott?
It sounds like Mr. Karrsen has a lot of life experiences that we all could have much to learn from.
Yeah. So yeah, getting back to kind of how the local scene really kind of flipped me was because at the national level, we all pay attention to national politics a lot, right? And what's really with COVID, it woke me up to what's going on that was shutting us down during COVID, right? It was our local government. Right. The first one I was fine with. I remember that I was like, okay, great. Like vacations make sense. I was supportive of the mask requirements back then because we didn't know what we were dealing with. Right. But
That's a lot of right around the same time I first met you.
And actually, we talked about this because we disagreed on the masks, right? We disagreed on that one, but we were both opposed to the shutdowns and we worked together. It was the first thing I noticed because on the left, it seemed like it was always like when I was working with the Democrats, because I worked for the Democrats for about 10 years, off and on. Basically every election cycle, I would just pick a candidate and I would just, canvass for them, door knock, phone bank, whatever. And ironically, the last one I did was Felix Rivera. And it was during COVID, that first round. We were shut down. There was a local election going on and I was looking around from a candidate. I heard Felix Rivera talk and I said, I thought, he sounds like a nonpartisan workhorse. Checks out to me. So I made about 750 phone calls for him during the first shutdown. Yeah. And, looking back, it's amazing that I believed that. Because after the third shutdown, when it was clear that this is not warranted, I started going to assembly meetings. And the first thing I noticed was that there was nobody there. It was amazing. There was I think him and Jamie Allard were the only ones that were showing up on a regular basis. Yep. And I started wondering how do we even know that they're there? I don't even know. I kept asking that question, and I never got a clear answer to that.
You listen for the snoring.
Yeah, that's right. Cameron Perez Verdia. I don't know if you guys have seen that video that was circulated recently. Amazing. All your viewers should watch that one. But anyway, I started to watch what else was going on, and I got really annoyed with them. I especially got annoyed with Forrest Dunbar because he was running for mayor, and he wasn't showing up for 6 months. Right. But at the time, I wasn't really on the conservative side of things. I was just mad about this particular issue, the shutdowns, and I realized we need to get Mayor Bronson elected because I know we're going to be safe with him. We're not going to get that, right? I didn't hate Forrest. I don't hate anybody, but it wasn't like I was really against any of these people yet. I just thought that I didn't want Forrest Dunbar to be our mayor because I was not convinced that he would not shut us down. And I was more concerned, not just with the shutdowns, but with the way they were weaponizing COVID to do a lot of things that really irritated me. They were using social distancing to not show up for work. They were just doing it because I think just because they're lazy. I honestly don't know if it's even malice. They just don't want to show up because they're long, boring meetings and they don't want people hours. It's a nice little break. And then after the election was over and we won, I was like, okay, great. Maybe they got the message. Okay. And along the way, I met a lot of really cool people, yourself included, and we had political differences. But what I found was dealing with you guys, we were able to compartmentalize those. I was like, yeah, we disagree on the malice. I remember there was one friend of mine who told me it was all about fear. Now looking back, it does seem to be like he was more right than I was. So I stopped caring for a while, stopped paying attention again, right? I was like, okay, we're safe from the shutdowns. Looks like we're through this thing. And then they tried to reinstated the mask mandate. Remember that?
Yep.
And that really, really, really stuck in my craw. Because at that point, it was very, very clear. They knew when they introduced that second mask mandate. We already had the vaccinations out. We had all of the other treatments. We had monoclonal antibodies. We had ivermectin. We had all of these treatments available, and we can discuss those, right? And it was very clear that we do not need to be doing this anymore. It was very, very clear, right? And so I got very angry about that. And what really stuck in my craw was when I showed up to the assembly meetings. And Meg Zelatul, the assemblywoman who was proposing those, wasn't even there. Yeah. She was gone the entire time. And first, I don't know what it was, but that was the straw that broke my back. I was watching my own party weaponize this pandemic for political purposes for years, and I just decided, you know what, I'm done with this assembly. We need changes.
Well, and the funny thing is through that whole entire thing, when they did show up, they were all masked up, double masks. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing was they were still allowing people to walk up to the dais and talk to them. Mm-hmm. And I know of at least 3, probably 4 of them that came down with COVID. Meg had it. The acting mayor had it. Remember, she missed a couple meetings because she had it. Dunbar had a coughing fit in a senior home one time. Mm-hmm. That made the news. And I know Constant had it. And so it wasn't something that masks were going to prevent. They got it, and they supposedly wore them all the time, unless you were out in the valley, and then Constant would be walking around with no mask on. Mm-hmm. But the whole idea that, we needed to be masked up rather than breathing fresh air blew my mind. It was funny going into a lot of stores and stuff wearing the masks or not wearing masks, and people that had the same feelings that you had would give you a thumbs up. It was like, hey man, thanks for sticking up. I don't know how many times I got accosted in stores. It was a bunch. And usually if I was in there with my wife, nothing would get said to me. But if I was in there by myself, there was always someone coming up. It was you could say a Karen or whatever. Where's your mask at? And one time I had to embarrass one lady because she was like getting in my face, wearing her mask, of course, but getting in my face, not wearing one. I'm like, you realize that if you believe this, you're putting yourself in more danger by getting close to me. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, you need to be wearing a mask in here. Everybody needs to be wearing a mask. And I'm like, for one, there's no mask mandate. This was after it was all dropped. Mm-hmm. And two, I'm in charge of my health. You're not. Get out of my face. I made some other comments too that I'm not going to repeat on here, but I had people laughing in the other aisles, and she walked away, stomped away, whatever you want to say. And I'm sure I made someone's day that day, but the whole idea behind America and what we stand for is no one forces crap on us. And every time that happens, we go to war. And you could say that COVID was like a war here, in nationally or in the state, whatever. And you had to pick a side. And the thing was I didn't discriminate against somebody wearing a mask. If you want to wear it, wear it. That's your decision. Don't force it on me or the kids and stuff that are out there. And I think still to this day we haven't lost a single school age kid, as far as I know. We may have up here, but I know that is the lowest demographic that we've lost nationwide by far.
Right, and there's a reason that I think that that the left is really adamant about mask mandates, is especially in schools, is that they know that people who oppose other parts of their agenda, like the ideology that they want to advance, also tend to correlate heavily with not wanting their children masked, being forced to wear masks for a disease that's not going to kill them, and everyone knows that, right? And their method is to push. This is something really important to understand about how the modern left operates. They want to push buttons that make everybody who can't be intimidated or indoctrinated leave whatever organization they're trying to take over, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, the Anchorage School District. I'm not going to name names, but there are organizations that want to control the staffing. They want to control the chief equity office. There's a new office they created. And they knew that mask mandates are going to drive a lot of conservatives out of the school district. And that was the goal. It's not about public health. And we all know that, right? And they know that. They're trying to drive people out. And that's what really, really frustrates me. It's because they know that a lot of times they can't convince people of the rightness of their position. So they just want to drive you out if you're a skeptic, right? And that's why I think that's been the motivation. I think that's been the motivation from a lot of people for why they're pushing mask mandates. In the case of the assembly, I think it's slightly different. It's that because COVID disproportionately affected elderly population and they vote more, they wanted to basically they wanted to be the party of fighting COVID, right? So it's for political purposes, even though they know that the mask mandates are probably not going to have much effect on any kind of COVID death rate at all.
Right.
They're doing it for political purposes, and the way they weaponized it really grossed me out.
Yep. I mean, and you could look at it. That's how they got Trump out. Whatever they basically made it to where it was more difficult to go out and vote and all this other kind of stuff. And here's the funny thing that I get a kick out of, and I've asked this question numerous times. So mail-in ballots, because it will help the disadvantaged people out there, right? Mm-hmm. They'll be able to get their ballots in. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to really show IDs, anything like that. It's all the signature match or whatever. So my question on that whole thing was the homeless population that they're trying to help here. How does that affect them? Where are they mailing their ballots to? Do they have IDs? I'm sure they do. Anytime a police officer pulls up and asks them for an ID, they have to show it. It's the law. So we have laws on the books saying that you have to have an ID. Same thing with every state in the union. And my question is how do they know that the ballots that they're sending out to the homeless population are actually reaching the homeless population? They don't. And they don't care. And that's the one thing that I would stress to anybody that's out there that's homeless. Hey, did you get your ballot? Well, I didn't even ask for one. Well, they still mailed them to you. Oh, really? Well, where are they going to mail them to? I'm telling you, you ask them.
That's a good question.
Because they don't know. And so, I bring this up because there was one homeless guy that's been showing up at the assembly recently. His name's Christian. He's a nice guy. I tried to help him, try to get him a job with me. His background didn't allow for it. So I put some good words into him with construction companies so he could go out and do, general labor kind of stuff. And he didn't want to work in the cold, and I understand that. He's out in the cold all the time. And, he's been going around. He's been doing better. He's been trying to get work and everything else. And Bronson actually put him on a commission.
I was there that night, actually. That was a class move by Bronson. That was good.
The thing is you do something good for a homeless person and you put them in the right positions, and they're going to thank you for it. And they're going to respect you for it. And he did a speech, or he did a testimony that night and brought me up. He didn't say me by name, but he knew who I knew who he was talking about. And he thanked me for, giving him kind of a prop up. And for me, that wasn't what it was about. I seen a human being that was struggling, and I tried to help. And that's what we're supposed to do. The thing is, like with the assembly, is they say a lot of things, but their actions speak completely different. It's like Bronson's got this whole thing with 300 beds, right? And they want to cut it down to 150. Okay, so you're wanting to keep the Sullivan full. Is essentially what they're trying to do. We have a new hockey team that's supposed to be coming into Anchorage. They need the Sullivan. They need the revenue from us going in there buying tickets to watch the hockey games, and they don't care. They would rather perpetuate the problem. And with the mask mandates and the lockdowns and stuff, guess what? They created a bigger problem rather than help it. And it was that way nationwide. The homeless population, if you were to look at the numbers before COVID and after COVID, it's exploded. But think about that aspect of what COVID did. It got rid of a lot of middle class. It got rid of, there were still middle class, but it put a lot more pressure on the middle class to do what they wanted us to do.
Yeah, and there's what's kind of fascinating is that we have a homeless problem and a labor shortage at the same time. I find that kind of odd. But the thing is, I'll say on this note, there's ways you can help that, right? There's one organization that does basically trains them to be cooks, right?
Yep.
And funnels them straight into the restaurant industry. And I actually
There's a bunch.
I come from the restaurant industry, and you know what? Dishwashers, it doesn't matter what your background is. Cooks, doesn't matter what your background is. Waiters, you have to, the same thing. In the restaurant industry is a place where like almost anybody can go and make a living, right? And it's work that anybody can learn in like less than a couple months, right? So you can funnel these people into jobs, right? If they've just got a little bit of a desire to do it.
There's a painting contractor here in town that teaches, and he's willing to teach anybody. He said, I friended the guy. It was kind of funny. I friended him, and next thing you know, I'm getting messages from him. Hey, would you like to attend our painting class? It's an industrial painting company, and they go through and they paint homes and they paint businesses and stuff when they're being built. I mean, they're looking for people left and right, and it doesn't cost anything to go. It's just your time. You don't make any money, of course, but it's something you can turn into a career down the road. And I know of several different places here in town that you can go to a school and you can get financial help and financial aid and stuff like that, and take these courses, and you can be a tradesman. You can go to work for all kinds of different places if you have the knowledge and the know-how and the will to want to do it. And unfortunately, if you go and you talk to some of these people that are on the corner, most of them are inebriated or drunk or just down on their luck. Most of them don't want to. They want to be left alone. Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. As long as they're not bothering anybody, what can you do? In the area that I work in town, we have them coming in and out of the bowling center all the time. Yeah, they'll sneak. If you kick them out, in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 people that tried to overdose on heroin. Well, not tried to, but shooting up heroin in our bathrooms. We've had to kick them out, trespass them, whatever. And I guarantee you in 2 weeks, they'll be back. Mm-hmm. It's a nice, warm place that they can go into. They don't have to freeze while they're shooting up. And, living close to San Francisco, they opened up places there that were safe shooting sites. They can go in and shoot up for free. They got nurses on staff and everything else that'll give you Narcan if you overdose, needles, and everything else.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
No, it's all bad.
It's it's one of those problems where like the easier you make it to be in that situation, the more people you're going to have to deal with.
Well, Scott's been a world traveler. He's seen some of this stuff. He knows what I'm kind of talking about in San Francisco. So, Scott, throw in some of your viewpoints on some of this stuff.
Well, San Francisco, I used to love that city. It was a gorgeous city, beautiful, but over the last several years, it has really gone downhill. And I am a local tour guide, and I get a lot of people from San Francisco, and they're talking about how they want to leave the city because of the way the city administration has allowed the homeless situation to destroy the beautiful city that it once was. And I've traveled all over the U.S. with millions of miles for many years, and I've seen many places. That was one place I would originally wanted to live, but now there's no way. I don't even want to go there.
I felt the same way about Seattle. Have you guys been to Seattle lately?
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was sooner than that. I guess I was there when I had my eye surgery. Luckily, I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, no, it's especially like downtown when I go there. Sometimes it's like you'll just see people sleeping on the streets, man, and like it appalls me that like you just would allow that to happen. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work.
Luckily, they've never allowed me out of the airport. I've always been in the airport, so
They do have a beautiful airport. I do like seeing that actually.
yeah, except for to fly to Alaska or you're flying anywhere else, you got to like make a ruck from one end of the airport to the other to get on Alaska Airlines. That's the only thing I didn't like about it. But no, I would much rather fly into Seattle than I would Portland. I've flown into Portland, and that place is a joke, honestly. Fly in there at 8 o'clock at night, and there's nothing to eat. Nothing's open, and everything shuts down at 10. It's pretty insane. I don't know. Each place is different. I lived in California for 10 years, and that's when I got politically active. Was living in California, and the first event that I went to, first big event that I went to, was a rally in Berkeley, and wow, just the hatred, just the overall feel, and we went because it was a tax day rally. It wasn't a Trump rally or anything like that. It happened to be on April 15th, and it was a tax day rally, and we had a lot of speakers that were going to speak and everything else, and Antifa duck walking down the street. 200-fold, and there was probably 300 of us in the park, and they were all blacked out, looked like a bunch of retarded ninjas, honestly. And it was billed as it was called the Battle of Berkeley. I'll say that. And they came into the park, and the police left. They didn't want nothing to do with them. We ended up marching them later that day into Oakland PD, and Oakland PD beat the living crap out of them. And they're all college kids, and of course the ones that were running them, they didn't get anything done to them. We had one guy that got caught. He hit a guy in the head with a bike lock, split him open, ended up with like 32 or 35 stitches in his head. I mean, it was ridiculous. And we were there to just have a rally and have a good time and everything else, and these people come in to disrupt it. And I mean, there's videos on it all over YouTube. You can see all the mayhem that happened. We had helicopters above head. We had police snipers on the rooftops. It was insane. And that's whenever I kind of woke up, and I was not politically motivated until that point.
What year was this?
2017.
I remember that. That was intense.
We were all over the news. I was there. There was
This was when Milo Yiannopoulos.
No, it was after him.
It was after that. Okay.
Just after him.
Because I remember that being a big thing.
You remember when there was another political consultant or political person? It was a woman, and she showed up there at Berkeley to speak too, and she got basically kicked out of there. It was Milo was there the week or two before us, and then there was something else that happened around Berkeley at the same time. But the Battle of Berkeley was basically patriots and freedom-loving people against Antifa. And the funny thing was they white supremacists this and white supremacists that, and all of our speakers were all of different race. We had LGBTQ. We had a woman that started a LGBTQ gun group called the Pink Pistols. She spoke there. Then we had the Man Spot. He's a YouTuber. He showed up to speak. Big long beard, does gun show commercials. We had two African American folks that were there. There was no reason for anybody to invade the rally. Absolutely none. We weren't pushing right wing stuff, nothing like that, other than, you know, it was a tax day thing and it was April 15th. And next thing we know, we're getting invaded by Antifa. And it was insane, dude. I'm telling you right now, between big M80s going off in the air, we had a couple cops that got hurt later in the day. We had people getting hit in the head with crap, sticks, and everything else. We weren't allowed to have anything but defensive stuff, you know, shields and, you know, I had body armor on, face mask and stuff to keep down. And we didn't even go in there carrying this stuff. We kept it with us. We had it in backpacks and everything on the stage in case we got hit. And sure enough, we ended up having to use it all just to protect ourselves. We didn't hit anybody. We didn't start anything. And luckily, we kept them out on the street, not in the park. And we were allowed to do our stuff. The cops didn't arrest anybody on the right side of things that day. But there was like 30 of them that got arrested. Oakland PD arrested all.
Yeah. When you see that kind of thing, it's like, why were they attacking you though? Like, why did this start?
I think it was the thought of a right wing group or right wing politics seeping into Berkeley. And we went there because that was where it was Martin Luther King Park in Berkeley, right? Who screams freedom more than Martin Luther King? So we went there, and Berkeley College is one of the biggest cesspools as far as, I'll give you an example. Okay, so there's a group that's there. It's a young Republican group, and they are beat up. They're spit on. Their cars are destroyed like every year, and that's who originally tried to put this thing on. And we had a few other people that took it over, and because they a lot of the young Republicans wouldn't show up to this thing because they knew Antifa was going to be there. But there was flyers all over the school that this was going to happen. And of course, Antifa shows up, and they had like 3 levels. We seen how they operated that day. Mm-hmm. There was like 3 levels. They had the college kids, which didn't have a clue. And then they had the second level of them that would push the first kids in there. And then there was a third level of them that ran them all, and they stood around the borders. I seen in a group.
They're usually in the background too,
yes,
don't they? Yep.
And they're usually standing up